So now we will start with another constitutional body. In fact, this guy is an IAS officer or at maximum a senior Indian. So this guy is an IAS officer or a senior member of Indian Audits and Account Service. Indian Audits and Account Service. And in fact, this person is actually contributing to the part of executive. Fine, executive. And still, you have 4 articles in this Constitution of India dedicated to one office that is part of the bureaucracy. So it is very surprising. The importance of this particular office is this. In fact, you have 4 articles. 4 articles, which means almost 1% of the Indian Constitution is dedicated to this permanent executive. And this permanent executive is in fact a senior IAS officer or at maximum an Indian Accounts and Audit Service officer. And this person is in fact known as Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Fine. So Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in fact, is mentioned under which part of the Indian Constitution? Which part of the Indian Constitution? The office of Comptroller and Auditor General is also mentioned in Part 5 of the Indian Constitution, isn't it? Part 5 of the Indian Constitution consists of the Union Executive, Union Legislature, Union Judiciary, and finally you have the Comptroller and Auditor General. So he is in fact a permanent executive, isn't it? Even though he is part of the permanent executive, 4 articles dedicatedly provided for this particular office, and this is in fact the reason why Dr. Ambedkar has said that I am going to create 3 important offices for the Constitution of India. So everybody was in fact having that surprise to know which among the following are the 3 important offices as per the Constitution of India. So Dr. Ambedkar said, sir, one is the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court of India to uphold the spirit of justice. The second one is in fact the Election Commission of India. Why is there Election Commission of India? To uphold the spirit of democracy, isn't it? To conduct elections, uphold the spirit of democracy. And finally, you have the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in fact, is very important in democracy to keep the financial accountability. Financial accountability, as well as one of the prime feature of democratic form of government. When you talk about any of the institutions, one of the prime feature of a democracy is always check and balance, isn't it? Check and balance. So this is in fact the reason why Dr. Ambedkar said that Comptroller and Auditor General of India in fact is very important when it comes to the Constitution of India. Fine. So he is part of an executive. He is not even legislature. He is not even permanent. He is not even political executive, isn't it? You have the political executives like the President of India, the Vice President of India, the Prime Minister, the Council of Ministers. They are very important in a democratic form of government. He is not a political executive. He is in fact a permanent executive, isn't it? On the basis of the examination conducted by the Union Public Service Commission, or on the basis of the merit is what he is getting chosen as the Comptroller and Auditor General. And still in the Constitution of India, you have 4 articles, which means almost 1% of the Indian Constitution is dedicated to this particular office, that is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in fact, is mentioned under Part 5 of the Indian Constitution. That means Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in fact, is mentioned under the Union Government in article number, or starting from article number 148 to 151. 148 to 151 provides you the constitutional provisions that deals with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. And be very careful, it is not controller. Okay, it is not controller, it is comptroller. Very, very important, because these two words are entirely different. Okay, this is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. It is not controller, it is comptroller. We will try to understand what is exactly the reason why he is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Now, why the office of Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in fact, is the most important office under the Constitution of India? This is the first question coming into your mind. The concept of Comptroller and Auditor General of India can be traced back from the Government of India Act of 1858. Government of India Act of 1858. Fine. So the Government of India Act of 1858, in fact, so we are speaking about the Crown Rule period, isn't it? The Crown Rule period starts with the Government of India Act of 1858. So the Government of India Act of 1858, in fact, provided for an Imperial Auditor General. Imperial Auditor General. Fine. So this was, in fact, where the idea of an auditor has got evolved from the source, and later by the Government of India Act of 1935, in fact, this is the one particular act where which you will first see the term comptroller and auditor. Comptroller and auditor. Fine. So in fact, the idea was actually emanating from the Government of India Act of 1858. But when you are asked about, in fact, the term Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in fact, that has got its source from the Government of India Act of 1935. The word, or in fact, the term Comptroller you will see for the first time in the Government of India Act of 1935. So definitely, of course, this is British concept. There is absolutely no doubt. Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in fact, has the source from Britain. It is a British concept. But it is not as per the British concept. We have been using this particular office of Comptroller and Auditor General. We have a different function for Comptroller and Auditor General. Sir, so you have not adopted the concept of Comptroller and Auditor General from Britain? Absolutely, we have. Absolutely, we have adopted the office of Comptroller and Auditor General from Britain. But it is not exactly the same way in which the Comptroller and Auditor General of Britain works is not exactly the same way in which the Indian Comptroller and Auditor General works. So the nature of performing action is different. And what is the different? See, when you see the term comptroller, what does it mean? It is not controlling, it is comptroller. What does it mean? See, this is in fact the permission to withdraw money. Controlling means, the term controlling means the permission to withdraw money. So in Britain, in fact, the permission to withdraw money from the consolidated fund or British Treasury. Fine. So in Britain, if the government, that is, if the executive need money to be withdrawn from the treasury, who will have to give the permission? In fact, the CAG will have to give the permission in Britain. But in India, that is not the case. In India, who will be giving the permission for the government to withdraw money? It is Lok Sabha, isn't it? It is the budget enactment by which the government will have the authority to withdraw money, isn't it? In other words, in India, the authority lies with the Lok Sabha, or in other words, in India, the authority lies with the People's House, which is Lok Sabha or the lower house. Because we are practicing, in fact, democracy. That is, in fact, it is the authority of people. So that is why even to withdraw rupees 1 from the consolidated fund of India, the Lok Sabha will have to give permission. In other words, the controlling function is absent for the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. He does not have the controlling functions in India, but the designation still is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Then what he is doing? He is just an Auditor General. Fine. He is just an Auditor General. He does not have any controlling functions. Say, for example, if a particular ministry says that we need rupees 1,000 crore for running one particular business, the Comptroller and Auditor General is in fact Indian Audit and Account Services Officer. He is very intelligent person, isn't it? He would be well having that knowledge that this business is going to be a failure. But can he control withdrawing money? No. Why? Because he is in India. In India, he does not have the power to control withdrawing money. He will audit only. When? After the business is done. Are you getting this? After the money is disbursed only, he will in fact come to picture. Before that, the screen space will be for Lok Sabha. Fine. So when you talk about the Comptroller and Auditor General in India, even though the designation is Comptroller and Auditor General, he is only an Auditor General. He is not actually performing the controlling functions. He is only an Auditor General. So you will have to understand this very, very clear. The concept of Comptroller and Auditor General we have got from the British Constitution. Of course, there is no doubt it is a British concept, but it is not exactly copy pasted. It has a difference in India, or its application is different in India. Why? Because the term controlling means giving permission to withdraw money from the consolidated fund. In India, the permission to withdraw money from the consolidated fund is given by Lok Sabha. So in fact, in India, controlling functions are exercised by Lok Sabha, not the Comptroller and Auditor General, but still the designation is Comptroller and Auditor General, or in other words, more suitable designation for this person is Auditor General of India, because he will only audit the accounts, audit the expenditure, audit the revenue. If everything is getting matched, fine. Otherwise, he will have to submit a report stating those particular discrepancies. So his functions will come after the financial year or at the end of the financial year only, not during the financial year. He might be knowing that this policy would be a failure. He might be knowing that the Ministry of Defense, unnecessary expenditure, but can he control it? No. The controlling function lies with the Lok Sabha, but unfortunately, when it comes to the Lok Sabha, the majority party will be always having an upper hand, isn't it? So if the majority party forms the government and they wanted to withdraw money and they have got the majority in Lok Sabha, they will withdraw the money and use it, isn't it? That is in fact one of the drawback or the limitation of Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Fine. So this is in fact as an introduction what you need to understand regarding the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Very good. Sir, still he is important. Now from the introductory part, you will be having a feeling that, sir, he does not have any role in controlling. And once, say for example, all the process is done, procedure is done, then what is he going to do? Then why should have Dr. Ambedkar said that Comptroller and Auditor General is going to be one of the most important offices as per the Constitution of India, isn't it? Is Dr. Ambedkar a foolish man? No. In fact, you need to understand why would have been Dr. Ambedkar created such a smart and clever person to be the Comptroller and Auditor General. You should understand exactly what kind of thought process would have in fact driven Dr. Ambedkar to create such a kind of office. See, we already have a thumb rule in the parliamentary form of government, isn't it? What is the thumb rule in the parliamentary form of government? If it is a parliamentary form of government, the importance lies with the responsible form of government, isn't it? Responsibility is what is the importance of parliamentary form of government. Who is responsible to whom? The executive is responsible to the legislature. In other words, you can say that the prime minister and the council of ministers are in fact responsible to Lok Sabha, isn't it? The Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers are responsible to Lok Sabha. Sir, what does this mean? Sir, these members of Lok Sabha will raise questions and you will have to give answers. Isn't it? These members will raise question and the PM and the Council of Ministers will have to answer the question. You have different sessions, say for example, question hour, you have no confidence motion, adjournment motion, calling attention motion, all those kind of things. Why these kind of things? The reason is because we are practicing parliamentary form of government, and in parliamentary form of government, the thumb rule is executive is responsible to the legislature. Very good. So the Lok Sabha has predominant consideration when it comes to the parliamentary form of government. Why? Because Lok Sabha will have the directly elected representatives, isn't it? The directly elected representatives will be in fact contributing to the Lok Sabha. In other words, what the nation think, the mentality of nation, or with whom the nation is standing upon, that you will in fact reflect from the Lok Sabha, isn't it? If Mr. Modi is the Prime Minister of India, what is the reason? The reason being is that he has got the majority support in Lok Sabha. Is it in Rajya Sabha? No. Is it in Parliament? No. In fact, more specifically, Mr. Modi has got the support, majority support in Lok Sabha. Why? Because Lok Sabha members, predominantly 50% of them have extended support to Mr. Modi government. That is the reason why Mr. Modi government is staying in power. In other words, these members will ask question to Mr. Modi government and they will have to answer. If Mr. Modi government's answer is not satisfactory, then what happens? They will withdraw the support. Isn't it? These members will withdraw the support. In other words, the Council of Ministers will collapse. This is what is the essence of parliamentary form of government. It is the responsibility. Fine. So when it comes to the importance in parliamentary democracy, the importance lies with the Lok Sabha. In other words, we have given the power of money also with the Lok Sabha. Why? Because the budget is introduced in Lok Sabha, isn't it? The money bill, those bills are in fact introduced in Lok Sabha. And the Rajya Sabha, what can the Rajya Sabha do over a money bill? Rajya Sabha can only make a delay, isn't it? Rajya Sabha can only make a delay. For what? For the enactment of the money bill. In other words, for 14 days, Rajya Sabha can keep the money bill on the table without taking any action. On the 15th day, it will be passed exactly as per the decision of Lok Sabha. So who has more power when it comes to the matters of money, physical money? It is actually with the Lok Sabha. In other words, you can say that the custodian of public money is in fact the Lok Sabha. So that is the reason why we say that without the approval of Lok Sabha, ₹1 even cannot be withdrawn from the consolidated fund of India. Fine. So very good. So the executive is responsible to the legislature. Great. Then why do we have the Comptroller and Auditor General? Executive is responsible to the legislature. Very good. Sir, but the problem is we actually need to make these institutions responsible. isn't it? The Lok Sabha, as per the decision of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, say for example, if the Ministry of Defence asks for rupees 1,000 crore, and if the Prime Minister has got the majority, then the Ministry of Defence will get the 1,000 crore rupees. Fine. But this needs to be checked, isn't it? Whether the process of allocation of this money by Lok Sabha for executive, that is for the Ministry of Defence, whether this is right or wrong, that needs to be checked. Now, who will check that? That will be checked by this smart guy, that is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So you know that executive is responsible to the legislature. In other words, Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers are responsible to Lok Sabha. Now, sir, Lok Sabha is responsible to the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Lok Sabha will have to answer for the report made by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. In other words, what you need to understand is that as the thumb rule of parliamentary form of government is executive is responsible to legislature, Comptroller and Auditor General is just reversing it. The legislature is responsible to the executive, isn't it? Because Lok Sabha will have to answer regarding why this much money was allocated for this kind of business. It needs to be answered by Lok Sabha. Why? Because CAG will submit a report pointing out the discrepancies in these kind of expenditure. So this is the reason why we say that the function of Comptroller and Auditor General is to keep the financial accountability on Lok Sabha, as well as keeping the checks and balances to promote the spirit of democracy. So that is in fact the reason Dr. Ambedkar has said that Comptroller and Auditor General of India is very crucial, isn't it? This is the matter of public money, people's money. So that should be having a credibility and authenticity, isn't it? Whichever authority gives, even if we are practicing a representative democracy, isn't it? We are not practicing direct democracy, representative democracy, and even representative democracy itself is on the basis of majority. Because Lok Sabha, suppose in Lok Sabha, if Mr. Modi has got the support of more than 50% of members, then he can do anything and everything over the money matters. Have you ever heard that a budget is not enacted in India? No. Every time the budget will get enacted. Why? Because the ruling front has got the majority. But this decision would have been a wrong decision. And who can point out that this decision is in fact a wrong decision? That will be in fact done by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So now you tell me, is it important or not important? In fact, is very, very important when it comes to the financial accountability part. So this particular relation is reversed by this guy, that is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Fine. So the decision of Lok Sabha to allocate fund to different ministries, to different departments as part of budget enactment will be questioned by the Comptroller and Auditor General once after the financial year is over. Not before that. Fine. That is one of the limitation. Not before that. Only after the financial year is over. So his role will come only after the financial year. Okay. So this is in fact what you need to understand regarding the function of Comptroller and Auditor General. So we have already told you about the limitation. We know what is the thumb rule, that is executive is responsible to the legislature. In other words, the executive will be allocated funds by this Lok Sabha, isn't it? Lok Sabha will be allocating the funds. In other words, the power to allocate the fund, money, lies with the Lok Sabha. Very good. Now, can the Comptroller and Auditor General do anything in this stage? No, he will just sit and watch. Other than that, he is not supposed to perform any function. He will just be relaxed and watch how What amount of money is in fact allocated? Is it under political pressure or is it under money that is getting allocated? Everything will be, in fact, the Comptroller and Auditor General will be watching. And when will his role come into picture? At the end of financial year. Okay, at the end of financial year, this person will come into picture. In other words, his role comes after only, or his role is ex post facto role. You would have heard about ex post facto before. Have you? Ex post facto. You have not heard about ex post facto? Anywhere? Anywhere have you heard about ex post facto? Ex post facto. Okay, fine, leave it. No double jeopardy. Where is it? Where have you heard about no double jeopardy, no self-incrimination, no ex post facto law? Where? Election Commission, is it? No. Yes. Fundamental right. Yes, very good. In which article? Is it 22 or 20? Yeah. In fact, under article number 20 of the Indian Constitution, you would have learned about three important things. Number one, no ex post facto law. Number two, no double jeopardy. Number three, no self-incrimination. Very, very important constitutional provision which says that no ex post facto law. What does this mean? No ex post facto law means what? There is no application of a criminal law from back date. Isn't it? I have given you a number of examples. No application of a criminal law from a back date. In other words, suppose murder is not a crime today. Just imagine a condition. Fine. And you have committed a murder because of the reason that you know that it is not a crime today. After 6 months, Mr. Modi government has enacted a law in the parliament saying that murder will be a crime. And he is making that law having the legal effect from the day on which you have committed the murder. Can that be done? No. This is what do you mean by no ex post facto law. No ex post facto law means no application of criminal law from back date. Fine. No ex post facto law means no application of criminal law from back date. Now, ex post facto role means this role will start only once the process is over, which means you have used the money, you have got allocated with the money, you have done all the expenditure. Now, only after that, the role of this person will come. That is, he will audit the accounts of the central government as well as the state government. Understand? He will audit the accounts of the central government as well as the state government. And this is in fact the function of the Comptroller and Auditor General. You does not have a state Comptroller and Auditor General. You have only one Comptroller and Auditor General. You does not have a state Comptroller and Auditor General. Almost 99% of the accounts in India will be audited by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. What do you mean by audit? Audit is, yeah, check and balance basically, isn't it? How much money have came in? How much have gone out? Is it reliable or is it have a matching? That is what is auditing. Okay, so that is what is done by the Comptroller and Auditor General. Even before that, he does not have any role. Why? Because he is not the financial advisor of the government. Isn't it? If he is a financial advisor of the government, he will be performing a role. He will be performing a function. He is not the financial advisor of the government. So that is why he will just sit and watch whether the expenditures are used all the expenditures are allocated. As per the allocation, everything is used. All those things will be watched by him, and only the role will come after the end of financial year. So in fact, this can be termed as a limitation. So UPSC has asked a question for mains regarding the limitation on the office of Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So you need to understand exactly what the Comptroller and Auditor General of India can perform, exactly what the Comptroller and Auditor General of India can do. You need to understand everything regarding the Comptroller and Auditor General in such a way that the concept here is very, very important. Fine. Everybody will write that the Comptroller and Auditor General will be auditing the accounts. Everybody will write. But you should write that the Lok Sabha as having the custody of the money, that Lok Sabha will be made accountable by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So this is going to be your purpose. Fine. Yes. Now, what will he basically doing? I'll be just giving you exactly how the Comptroller and Auditor General of India will be performing. So this is just like a flow chart. You can just understand what is exactly happening over. Say, for example, see, there might be different departments or different ministries, isn't it? Say, for example, there is Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of, say, for example, Ministry of Communication, IT, isn't it? You have different ministries. Now, as part of the budget, the Ministry of Finance, especially speaking, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, will allocate the fund to different ministries. Fine. So the Comptroller and Auditor General will see, or he may understand that this particular business is going to be a failure, but can he interfere? No, he will sit and watch. Once the financial year is ended, he will in fact write to all the ministries, sir, please send your account details. Fine. You have already been allocated the fund. You have used it for your business. Now, please send your credit as well as debits. Because I need to audit it. I need to audit it. So please send me how much money you have made as a profit. How much is there as a loss? Is there any discrepancies? Let me see. So please send me the details. On the basis of this detail, he will prepare a CAG report. Okay, Comptroller and Auditor General report, or you may say CAG report. He will prepare a CAG report. Fine. So in this CAG report, he will be in fact including the auditing details. Auditing details. He will be in fact including the auditing details, and he will in fact notice if there are some discrepancies or corruptions included as part of the expenditure of money. Fine. He will separately note it down. This much money is not seeing here. This much money, I don't know where it is gone. The Ministry of Home Affairs or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have unaccounted money. So he will in fact point to some of the discrepancies or corruption. And he will submit the report to the President of India or the Governor. Now, can the Comptroller and Auditor General take the decision that this year I will not submit the report? I just don't want to make any kind of struggle or trouble for the government. So I am not preparing the report for the time being. Is it possible? No. It is the constitutional duty. Fine. The CAG report is in fact the constitutional duty of the Comptroller and Auditor General. He is not supposed to be reluctant from submitting the report or producing the report. He should compulsorily per year, report to the President of India or to the Governor. Sir, President of India or to the Governor? Is it his option? To To whom he should submit the report to? The president or the governor? Yeah. If the audit is concerning the central government accounts, that will be submitted to the President of India. If the audit is concerning to the state government accounts, that will be presented to the governor of the state. Okay. The governor or the president, in fact, will further lay the report in the parliament. Fine. So the president of India or the governor, they are actually part of the executive, isn't it? Now, Comptroller and Auditor General will, in fact, keep accountability on the legislature. So can Comptroller and Auditor General question President of India or Governor? No. Why? Because they are part of the executive. Can the executive question the executive? No. But the executive can question legislature here. So he will ask the President of India, my dear President, please submit the report before the Parliament of India. Now the role of Comptroller and Auditor General is over. The report is submitted and the role of Comptroller and Auditor General is over. Now the President of India will submit this report, which is made by the Comptroller and Auditor General, in front of the Parliament. Fine. Now the Parliament, that is both the Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha, will see regarding the Comptroller and Auditor General report, and they will in fact, if find any sort of corruption. You might have heard about Public Accounts Committee in Parliament of India. There is a committee which is known as Public Accounts Committee. So in case if there is any kind of corruption or discrepancy, the matter will be left to the Public Accounts Committee. Now, who will be members of the Public Accounts Committee? Can the ministers be members of the Public Accounts Committee? No. Why? Because the fund is utilized by the ministers. Now, in that fund, there is some discrepancy which is found by the Comptroller and Auditor General. Now, this will be checked again by the Public Accounts Committee. Fine. The Public Accounts Committee will be consisting of only the members of Parliament who are not ministers. Fine. Who are not ministers. So they will in fact question the executive regarding the expenditure. So understand the way Dr. Ambedkar has designed this particular office. The dynamics of this particular office is very, very important. So this Public Accounts Committee will be consisting of those members who are not ministers, and they will start questioning the ministers regarding what all kind of discrepancies that they find inside this particular expenditure. Fine. If the ministers answer, fine. If the minister, say for example, if the Minister of Defense answer for that question quite satisfyingly, then everything is fine. But if the minister is unable to answer the question, if the minister is unable to answer the question, there can be even actions like the Public Accounts Committee may refer this matter of scam to the Central Bureau of Investigation. Why? Because there is a scam. Isn't it? You might have heard about the 2G spectrum case. That is one of the cases in which the Public Accounts Committee has found some discrepancies and have referred that particular case to the Central Bureau of Investigation. And the Central Bureau of Investigation has charged the case under the PMLA Act. What is PMLA Act? Prevention of Money Laundering Act, isn't it? Prevention of Money Laundering Act. The CBI has registered the case. So the Public Accounts Committee, or this is in fact whose impact? The impact lies with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. If the Comptroller and Auditor General of India is not giving these kind of reports or these kind of discrepancies, will there be such kind of action? No. So you can't get away with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So if the Public Accounts Committee has got any doubts regarding the technical matters of the report of Comptroller and Auditor General, because this report will be very much technical in nature, isn't it? The economic matters, the subject of economics is very much technical. So the matter might not be easy for the legislators to understand, isn't it? How many of them will understand what about, say, for example, open market operations? How many of our MPs will understand about these technical terms? They will not even understand. If one person come and speak in Malayalam, even they will not understand. Then how can they understand economics? We have been trying for 6-7 months to understand economics, and we are zero now still, isn't it? In economics, is it? Are you still zero in economics? No, but you will understand, isn't it? So you are fit to become the member of parliament, not IAS officers. At least you can check the Public Accounts Committee or the Comptroller and Auditor General's report, isn't it? Now these members, they does not have any educational qualifications to fulfill, isn't it? Is there an educational qualification for any member of parliament? No. Is there a compulsory provision that this person needs to clear graduation or at least 10th class? No. And how can he understand this? And you say that it is all because of democracy. They have the people's faith. So you have faith in that person, but that person should be capable of doing something back in return. Unfortunately, that is not the case, isn't it? That is exactly what is happening. But there is one issue, there is one fortunate thing for them. Even educated people in India does not know what exactly is going through in the parliament. So that they will vote for those people again and again and again, and they will make them win again to the Lok Sabha as well as other elections, isn't it? You vote on the basis of how they smile, whether the people, they are good enough to keep a good smile on their face, isn't it? When you see the election results of many of the state legislative assemblies in Kerala, you will see that the deserved candidates are not being elected. And those people who will go for the cremation ceremonies, the marriages, all those kind of things, those people will get elected, isn't it? Is that the criteria you need to put vote? No. Unfortunately, our people also does not know this, what exactly is happening inside the legislature. What you should see is that how this person is performing for your legislative assembly or Lok Sabha constituency in the Lok Sabha or state legislative assembly. Whether he is capable to present the matter in the house. This is what is his purpose. A person who does not know how to speak, if getting elected to Lok Sabha or the state legislative assembly, then what he is going to do there? Can he do anything for you? At least he need to read it out. That is impossible. And that is how, or that is where the importance of Mr. Shashi Tharoor comes in. He will be very good in presenting the matters, isn't it? He'll be very good in presenting the matters. You might have heard about N.K. Premachandran also. N.K. Premachandran, who is the Lok Sabha member from Kollam, he presented the matters. That is what the capability you should see when you elect a person to the legislature. He should be able to make the executive understand or the house understand that these are the requirements of your particular constituency. Otherwise, you are just going to the booth and wasting the time. Fine. So you are, or we are also equally responsible for the mistake our representatives are committing. Fine. So from the next time, make the right choice. It should not be for the person, those who have attended your brothers or sisters' marriage function or cremation function of your great grandparents or somebody else. No, that is not the matter. The matter is whether this person is capable. Fine. Yes. So in fact, in case if there is a corruption, the Public Accounts Committee can refer that matters to the investigation agency. They can charge the matter. Now, if the Public Accounts Committee does not understand this, even you can call the Comptroller and Auditor General. These committee members can in fact ask the Comptroller and Auditor General, sir, what you have written, we are not understanding this. Please explain what exactly you have written. Otherwise, we are not supposed to have exactly taking a decision on this issue. And that is the reason why Comptroller and Auditor General of India is known as the friend and philosopher of Public Accounts Committee. Okay, the friend and philosopher of Public Accounts Committee. It is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, who is known as the friend and philosopher of the Public Accounts Committee. Fine. So this is what is exactly the way the Comptroller and Auditor General of India will have to perform. Now, regarding the appointment of Comptroller and Auditor General, the appointment will be done by the President of India. The oath will be administered by the President of India. Very simple. So the Comptroller and Auditor General will be appointed by the President of India, as well as the oath will be administered by the President of India. Simple matters. Now, regarding the term of the Comptroller and Auditor General, it is 6 years or 65 years. So 65 years. Yes, in fact, this 65 is age. Okay, 6 years tenure or up until the age of 65 years. Whichever is earlier, this person will have to leave the office. Fine. Suppose, say, just take an example. 6 years is over, but the person has not reached the age of 65. Say, for example, if one person has got appointed as the Comptroller and Auditor General at the age of 50. At the age of 56 years, his 6-year tenure is over. But has he reached 65 years by age? No. Can he stay in the office for the 65 years? No. Whichever is earlier, he will have to vacate. Okay. Otherwise, just take another example. One person has got appointed as Comptroller and Auditor General at the age of 63 years. After 2 years, he gets into 65. But his 6 years are not completed. Now, can he say that, sir, my 60 years are not completed? Let me stay for 70. Up to 70, let me stay here. Is it possible? No. So, whichever is earlier, the earlier one will be taken into account. Okay, the earlier one will be taken into account. The resignation will also be submitted to the President of India. He will address the resignation to the President of India. Reappointment in case of Comptroller and Auditor General. Is he capable for the reappointment? No. No. Okay, fine. Now, when it comes to the resignation, the resignation will be submitted to the President of India. Simple matters, all those things comes under the factual information. Now, the removal of Comptroller and Auditor General of India is in fact exactly same as that of the Judge of Supreme Court. Fine. The removal of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India is exactly following the same process as that of the Judge of the Supreme Court. Now tell me how the Judge of the Supreme Court can be removed. Who can remove the Judge of the Supreme Court? President? Okay, fine. So you have told me that the removal will be done by the President of India. Very good. Absolutely right. When you make such a kind of statement, what is the meaning that convey? The judges of the Supreme Court are removed by the President of India. This is what you have said, isn't it? Which means what? the judges of the Supreme Court shall be removed by the President of India on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister. Is it exactly the same way? No. So what you need to say is that the judges of the Supreme Court shall be removed by the President of India on the recommendation of the Parliament. Fine. It is only on the recommendation of the Parliament the President can remove. So that is the reason why there is a tail end. After the President of India, if there is nothing, that means it is on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister. If there is something which is provided after writing the President of India, means it is in fact a disclaimer for you. You should be well aware of exactly what is the reason for that. Otherwise, Mr. Modi will take the decision that the Supreme Court judge, let us remove him. Mr. Modi will call the President of India, madam, this judge is in fact dangerous person, remove him. Isn't it? So that will be the interpretation in which the way which you have said now. So that is wrong. Okay. The President of India may or shall remove the judges of the Supreme Court only on the recommendation of the Parliament. Fine. So for that recommendation, there are certain conditions. And one condition is as per you have said, that is a resolution needs to be passed by what majority? By special majority under article number 368. Fine. That special majority is the requirement. Now, where can it be initiated? Is it in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha? Yes, the process can be initiated both in Lok Sabha as well Rajya Sabha. If it is initiated in Lok Sabha, that needs to be supported by 100 members. If it is initiated in Rajya Sabha, that needs to be supported by 50 members. Fine. So that is what is the process of the removal of the judges of the Supreme Court. Fine. And where is this process mentioned? In which article this process is mentioned regarding the removal of the judges of the Supreme Court? The process, where is it mentioned? It is not mentioned in the Constitution. Okay. It is not mentioned in the Constitution. It is mentioned in the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. Okay. So understand the process of removal of the judges of the Supreme Court. The process of removal of the judges of the Supreme Court is mentioned in the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. But the ground for the removal of the judges of the Supreme Court is mentioned in the Constitution. It is proved behavior and misbehavior and incapacity. So those grounds are mentioned, but the process you have to follow. What kind of majority, where it needs to be started, how many of them needs to be supporting this proposal, all those kind of things are in fact provided in the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. So the removal in fact is same as that of the judge of Supreme Court. All these same process is applicable for the removal of the judge of, the removal of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India also. Fine. Now, what about the salary? The salary is determined by the Parliament of India. Okay. The salary of the Comptroller and Auditor General is in fact determined by the Parliament of India. Now, it is very important that the Comptroller and Auditor General of India needs to be independent, isn't it? We need an independent Comptroller and Auditor General of India. That is very, very important. So for that reason, our Constitution has provided certain safeguards. Number one, the Constitution has provided a security of tenure for the Comptroller and Auditor General. Why? I have told you that the Comptroller and Auditor General can be removed by the President of India on the recommendation of the Parliament, which means that there is a security of tenure. In other words, the removal is not on the basis of the pleasure of the President. It is on the basis of the recommendation of the parliament. So he has got the security of tenure. Fine. He has got the security of tenure. Not eligible for further office under the government of India or any state. What do you mean by this? Suppose if the Comptroller and Auditor General of India is preparing the report, fine, just understand he is busy in preparing the report. Now there is a phone call from Mr. Modi. Sir, Mr. Modi here. So the Comptroller and Auditor General of India will say, yes sir, tell me. So Mr. Modi will say, sir, I know you are preparing the report, and unfortunately we have just taken out rupees 1,000 crore, which will not come in the account. And if you write a report without mentioning this discrepancy, we will provide you, in fact, with a favor after your service is over. We will make you reappointment, or we will in fact provide you some favor by appointing you as an important officer under the government of India. So you will get more salary after even the retirement age. You can enjoy. So the Comptroller and Auditor General will see, okay, fine, yeah, what is the problem? Let me enjoy my post-retirement life. Such kind of things, is it in fact likely to happen in the democratic form of government? No. So that is the reason why Dr. Ambedkar has clearly mentioned that he is not eligible for further office under the government of India or any state. You are not supposed to hold any further office of the government of India or the government of any state, because on that expectation, you are not supposed to hide out any kind of corruption or indiscrepancies within your CAG report. Do not hope that you will be given a favor by the government of India. Is it clear? Fine. So there is no scope for not eligible for further office under the government of India or state. Salary cannot be varied into disadvantage. What does it mean? The salary cannot be reduced while he is in service. Fine. While he is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, his salary cannot be reduced, which means Prime Minister Narendra Modi cannot threaten Comptroller and Auditor General of India, sir, if you write the report against our government, we will cut short your salary. No, that is not possible. The salary needs to be compulsorily paid, which is known as the charged expenditure. In other words, the salary, the other expenses for the maintenance of the office of Comptroller and Auditor General of India, even if the budget is not enacted, whatever is remaining in the consolidated fund of India, that should be paid to these particular offices. Why? Because we need an independent office. Okay, we need an independent office. Whatever may the situation be, does not matter. The first among few of them which needs to be considered for the payment of salary is the CAG, that is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Clear? Fine? Yeah. So that's it regarding Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Okay.